Welcome to our 150th anniversary event for Vacro. My name is Marius Smith and I'm the CEO of Vacro, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet tonight, the people of the Kulin Nations, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. And also to acknowledge our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander friends in the room with us tonight, and to acknowledge the approximately 750 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander men and women who will go to sleep in an adult correctional facility tonight, and their families. We're gathered here tonight in the Assembly Hall, and would you believe this is where on the 30th of July 1870, or actually this is the new hall in the old Assembly Hall, the site where Vacro, originally known as the Discharged Prisoners Aid Society, was formed, and for this reason we felt that this was the obvious place to hold our 150th anniversary celebration. Over the years we've changed our name a couple of times, but we've never merged or gone into a period of abeyance, and our mission to support those in contact with the criminal justice system has never wavered. And tonight's a chance to reflect on that long history and what Vacro has meant to the people of Victoria. You'll see that we've got a number of speakers tonight and a panel and a number of videos, and I hope it'll be an enjoyable and entertaining night. To begin proceedings, I'd like to welcome Tegan Hartwick to the stage. Tegan was a mother of two when she was sentenced to a term of imprisonment. When she left prison, Tegan was supported by Vacro to settle back into the community and pursue the plans that she'd made in prison before she came back to Vacro in a very different role. Please welcome Tegan.
Hi everyone here tonight. As Maria said, my name is Tegan and I'm 37 years old. I have two children, William, who is turning 16 this year. He was 9 when I was incarcerated, and Mila, who is turning 7. She was 5 months old when she came to live with me within the prison when I was sentenced. My first memory of Vacro was when I was 5 years old, travelling into Pentridge Prison to visit my stepfather. I always remember feeling excited and knowing that Vacro were the people that ensured my stepdad would give me a present at the end of the year. There were a lot of Christmases. Fast forward 28 years and I'm getting ready for parole myself. I remember some officers saying to me, "You won't need Vacro. You have a family and a home to be paroled to." However, I was persuaded at one of my last MRCs one day to at least think about it. I thought to myself, at the very least, I could get my Vacro worker to drive me to my first parole appointment. I did link up with them and I was given a worker. However, after meeting her for the first time, she was to go on leave. So one day I get a link up, and who's on the other side of the screen but no other than Sarah Hughes. I remember going 100 miles an hour, feeling anxiety and stress of the unknown and not getting a whole lot of answers from the outside world. Sarah, however, remained calm with a smile on her face, assuring me that she would do her best to find out what was happening amid my release. I walked out that day not having any expectations on Sarah, as I'd only just met her that once. Being in prison, I think you learn not to have expectations because they may never be met. However, much to my surprise, a few hours later, there was a buzz up in my unit with a message from Sarah. She had come through, and that was the start of a very trusting relationship. Once I came home, my parole officer felt that it would be a good idea to study. Wow, I'm thinking to myself, I hadn't studied since year 12, I didn't understand Zoom, and I didn't know how I'd go with a class full of people. So I ring Sarah to express my feelings and ask her if she could help me get a laptop. The very next day, a laptop was delivered. Of course, it didn't stop there because as time went on, I needed to find placement. It wasn't easy to find placement whilst on parole with an ankle bracelet. However, Sarah was able to offer me placement within Vacro to complete my hours, and this just built a stronger foundation between myself and Vacro. Whilst completing my placement, I was lucky to work alongside another Vacro worker, Glenn Cooper, who I'm sure more times than I can count used some motivational interviewing techniques on me and taught me things that I'll always be grateful for. Fast forward 2 years, and I've completed my community services, my mental health and drugs and alcohol, and I'm working at a private drug and alcohol rehab whilst volunteering with Vacro. This is all whilst I'm still on parole. 2 months ago, I got off my parole, and Glenn came down to witness me getting my ankle bracelet off. I'm still learning who the Tegan is that is not the Tegan with a CRN, or the Tegan that is on parole. But I feel very lucky that whilst I'm learning, that I have Vacro beside me, cheering me on and believing in me. Sarah believed in me from the beginning, and my hope is that one day I can be a Sarah to somebody as she was to me. So I would like to thank Vacro, I'd like to thank Fran, I'd like to thank Marius and Glenn, but most of all, I'd like to thank Sarah. Before I end here, and I'm not even going to look at him because if I look at him, I'll cry, I would just like to acknowledge that there is a particular person here tonight that I believe carries the values that Vacro uphold from corrections. I never intended to include him in my speech because my story tonight is how I have bettered my life with Sarah beside me believing me. However, I couldn't stand here tonight without acknowledging him because my story obviously started nearly 6 years ago. And whilst being in prison before you coming up for release and finding out about Vacro, this man is not easy to come by, but yet was so important for my journey, and I know for so many others that are incarcerated. He enabled my daughter's safety and well-being whilst also treating me fairly. He made decisions in regards to me when I was unable, and he always treated me with respect and compassion. There was a time in prison that I felt my whole existence was up to this one man, and yet he was able to guide me to freedom. The very last time we saw each other, I asked him his wise words, considering we would probably never see each other again. And the universe has placed him here tonight, and I don't think I could stand up here without letting him know how internally grateful I will always be for him. And that person is none other than Mr. Money. Anyway, thank you guys for listening to my journey and enabling me to share it all with you guys. Thank you.
Tegan, my most heartfelt thanks. I'm so emotional. By the way, I'm Scott. I'm the chair of this absolutely amazing organisation, and hearing your story, it brings to life the reason why Vacro exists and how important it is for us to help enable new beginnings to everyone who needs it. I really appreciate, Tegan, you sharing how our organisation played a small role in your life, and I really love the way you talked about how to pay it forward. It really is exactly what it's all about. As I said, I'm really privileged to be the chair of this exceptionally important organisation. Prior to introducing the Minister, I'd like to share a short story on why I believe it is so important that Vacro exists today and into the future. It was April in 2011. I'd just commenced a course run by my then employer NAB called Adaptive Leadership. There were about 10 participants and 2 facilitators in a small room in Werribee Mansion. We'd been told by the facilitators that for the next 8 working days, we were going to learn about leadership. We're going to learn about it experientially by being immersed in the justice system for those 8 days. So in those 8 days, we were to experience all elements of the system, spending time with victims of crime, lawyers, magistrates, police, policymakers, support providers, as well as those currently incarcerated and those that had already done their time. For someone with absolutely no experience with the justice system, those 8 days were massively confronting, but they were also equally inspiring for me. Everyone we spent time with, and we spoke to a lot of people in those 8 days, just as a sidebar, spent a day in Port Phillip Prison in various sections and spent half a day at the Judy Lazarus Transition Centre. We heard both good stories and bad stories, and really clearly highlighting the challenges that the system faces. But there was also a consistent desire by everyone to make things better for those in the system and for the people more broadly. I could spend hours talking about what happened in those 8 days, but in short, there was one key learning. No system can improve unless people are prepared to step up and try and do things differently. And that's where Vacro comes in. For 150 years, our amazing organisation has stepped into the areas of greatest challenge. And through innovation and plain hard work, we've helped create new beginnings and stronger communities for tens of thousands of people and probably hundreds of thousands of people over that time. And there's been no time like the present where the need has been greater and Vacro's impact more broad or deep. And whilst we'll hear more about our current impact and the future for Vacro later, I wanted to share just a couple of examples around how we step up to do things differently at Vacro. We pioneered a support video visit program for families that was, to our knowledge, the first in the world. It was the first time a family worker had provided emotional support to a person in prison and their family in the community to ensure that they could have a positive, loving visit by video and start the long process in coming back together. This program has been funded by Corrections Victoria at the women's prisons and will expand to 9 men's prisons over the next year. It's just wonderful. When COVID at a more tactical level, when COVID hit, like everyone else, our staff accepted the new reality and modified the way they worked. There were face-to-face, instead of face-to-face group meetings in prisons, they became one-on-one videos, fairly common across multiple industries. But it wasn't just that, it was our case managers in the community did anything that they could do to keep in touch. Like even setting up a card table on the front porch to have lunch with participants on the other side of the screen door. To me, that's above and beyond. We're piloting a reintegration model at the Mallee, where Vacro staff and the Mallee District Aboriginal Service staff are working alongside each other to provide post-release support to the region's large Aboriginal community. And just one little individual story. Johnny, when Johnny was released, when Johnny relapsed into drug use after initially doing well post-release, he identified some issues that were building up for him, such as a lack of sleep and deterioration of mental health. Johnny and his Vacro case manager laid out these issues with his parole officer, including how they would address them. And as a result, he avoided further punishment. Together, they also identified a number of undiagnosed disabilities. And after an enormous amount of effort, they were able to help Johnny onto a significant NDIS package. He's now living independently in a place of his own. He loves to cook. He has his mum and his sisters over and cooks for them. He's enjoying woodworking. He's joined a men's shed. He wants to start a cabinet-making apprenticeship soon. And importantly, Johnny no longer keeps his problems bottled up. He asks for help when he needs it, and now he's got the people around him, the support he needs. So to the team at Vacro, I wanted to say a deep, grateful thank you for all of your hard work, your care and your innovation. For 9 years, you've inspired me with how you make a positive difference to the people in our dear state. And whilst we're talking about making a positive difference, I am so pleased to introduce the Honourable Sonia Kilkenny MP, who's a member for Carrum and the Minister for Corrections, Youth Justice and Victim Support, and the Minister for Fishing and Boating. Before entering Parliament, the Minister was a lawyer in commercial litigation and banking and finance. She also worked for the Kimberley Land Council in Broome and was on the board of the National Theatre and Back to Back Theatre. Minister, I welcome you to our very special 150th celebration, and I'd like to thank you and your department for our long-standing partnership. Together, I feel really we're making real progress. I'm seeing the step forward that our partnership is delivering, and I really can't wait to hear your perspectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott, and good evening, everyone. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the beautiful lands where we're meeting today. Pay my respects to elders past and present, to any other elders and community members who may be joining us today. I want to recognise the strength and the resilience of Aboriginal people and communities across Victoria. And I would also like to note that Aboriginal people are sadly 14 times more likely to be incarcerated here in Victoria than any other group. I'd also like to acknowledge, first of all, Tegan. I don't think there's much more any of us can say that even comes close to encapsulating just what a profound difference an organisation like Vacro and the people in Vacro can make to the lives of Victorians. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your story and also for calling out your incredible support worker at Vacro, Sarah. Where is Sarah? Sarah, amazing. And yeah. And I think, Tegan, you mentioned, was it Brendan as well? Was that right? Brendan, thank you. Incredible. Before I go on, could I also make some acknowledgements here tonight? Rod Barton, MP, Member for Eastern Metropolitan. Fiona Patton, MP, the Member for Northern Metropolitan. I think we have the Honourable Rita Encherti, Justice of the Supreme Court of Victoria. The Honourable David Harper, AM, Retired Justice of the Supreme Court of Victoria. Scott, Board Chair of Vacro, thank you for the introduction. And to all of the board members of Vacro, thank you for your contribution and your work. Maria Smith, CEO of Vacro. Judy Lazarus, is Judy here? Judy Lazarus, lovely to meet you. Thank you for coming tonight. Larissa Strong, Commissioner, Corrections Victoria. Sarah Miles, Deputy Commissioner, Corrections Victoria. And Brendan Money, the former Assistant Commissioner, Corrections Victoria. How wonderful it is to be here tonight to celebrate what is truly a remarkable milestone and a bit of a reunion as well, I suspect. Reaching this 150th milestone is simply extraordinary. So since 1872, it is quite incomprehensible to think that this organisation has been going for that long. One of the longest running not-for-profit organisations in Victoria, and certainly the oldest, our state's oldest and only specialised criminal justice reintegration service. Vacro's history is long, but I think more importantly, Vacro's work has been life-changing. For 150 years, Vacro has provided essential reintegration, family and employment support that has changed countless lives for the better, helping people to create new beginnings for themselves and their loved ones. But I think also importantly, sending a message to those people that we believe in you, that you've got opportunity, that there is a way forward, that there is support, and that we want to make sure that whether it's connection to family, whether it's through housing transition, employment, access to education, these are such crucial steps in that reintegration pathway. And I want to thank Vacro for all of the extraordinary work it has done over the years in supporting people to exit the prison system. As we've seen, Vacro was very much there during COVID to support and keep prisoners and families connected throughout the pandemic when restrictions saw in-person visits temporarily suspended. And I have to say the extraordinary work of Vacro aligns with this government's approach to reducing recidivism and preventing crime. All of us want Victorians to come into contact with the criminal justice system less. We all want more effective support for people at risk of offending, and ultimately we all want a safer Victoria. And that is why we are continuing to invest in critical rehabilitation and reintegration programs that are designed to reduce reoffending and ultimately to enhance community safety. So many programs that Vacro runs are just crucial and essential. There's RecLink, there's Reconnect, there is the ARC initiative as well, which is a wonderful program to help with transitional housing. Tonight, of course, we celebrate 150 years of supporting prisoners, families and communities to move beyond that contact with the criminal justice system. Tonight, we celebrate Vacro's inclusive and collaborative work with dedicated experts, dedicated support workers who are working in the field of reintegration, managing the complex needs of people leaving the prison system. I want to commend and congratulate and thank everyone involved at Vacro. You have helped change lives. You recognise the importance of dignity and hope and opportunity for those in need. So congratulations, Vacro, on your 150th anniversary, and thank you for helping build safer and stronger communities for all Victorians. Congratulations.
Thank you, Minister. And you might recall that pretty much as soon as you were appointed to your portfolio, you were fielding requests from Vacro to step in at short notice for this event on its original July date, and you came to the party at really short notice and did that, and then we cancelled on you 2 days later. So I really want to thank you for making the time to be here tonight. We will play 3 short video vignettes. The first video is an interview with Eve Cantor, whose mother Anne was a huge part of Vacro in the 70s, 80s and 90s, together with many amazing women, including Sylvia Morrissey and Carmel Benjamin. Anne died last week, aged 85. Her time at Vacro overlapped with one of our panellists tonight, Judy Lazarus. Not long after I started at Vacro, I met Judy for the first time, and suddenly the warm, joyous, non-judgmental, can-do nature of our staff made sense to me. I could clearly see the through line from Judy, who started at Vacro in the 1980s, to the culture of Vacro today. I was fortunate to be able to attend Anne Cantor's funeral this week, and the similarities between Judy and Vacro and Anne were obvious. She lived an amazing life, and she was a warm, generous and adventurous person, and I could see how she was drawn to Vacro and how Vacro was drawn to her.
I was really quite moved by hearing her words and seeing what extraordinary work those women did. It was pretty amazing. She's very proud of her involvement with Vacro. She has Alzheimer's now, and so she's had to distill the most important things in her life down to a small number. As you might know, we have her Dymo badge, which is like a brooch, which you would have seen in the photograph, which it says Anne Cantor, Vacro volunteer. And she treasures that more than she treasures her AO pin. She wears it in preference, and she's absolutely sure that the reason why she was given that AO is because of her volunteer work at Vacro, and she can still remember what Vacro stands for. For some reason, Mum and her friends in Kew, Sylvia Morrissey and Carmel Benjamin and various other women turned their heads to Pentridge in Coburg. They decided that the women and children who were connected through no fault of their own to men in prison to start with really probably needed a lot of help and support and kindness, and so it began. She was very big on women being treated respectfully, and she felt that they often didn't deserve what they got, which was not a lot of understanding or kindness, or and they weren't made to feel very welcome in Pentridge. Then they started the house in Champ Street. The house was somewhere that I think families, whether it was girlfriends or wives or mothers or parents and their children, could go before they went over for a visit and then to come back after. They had a playground outside. They had a room where, feeding mums could go and feed their babies, that kind of thing. Her lot in life was, to improve other people's, because she had the opportunity. She'd be so pleased that the work that they were doing at the time is continuing. She'd be so pleased. And she loves the idea, I think, that the baton has been passed on to the next generation. She would be particularly proud of that work. She went back to uni and finished her arts degree, which she had stopped when she married Dad. Then she did her social work degree, and then on top of that, she did her training to be a psychoanalytic psychotherapist. So she would be really tickled pink to hear that that's all still going on through Vacro. Vacro was clearly extremely important. So happy birthday, Vacro, from my mum.
When we were planning tonight's event, we thought it would be great to have a variety of voices from Vacro's past and present who could explain what Vacro means to them and why it's such a special place. So our panellists for that tonight are from right to left. Lisa Ward, who is a Vacro board member. So when I asked her to moderate tonight's panel, she didn't really have a choice. Among many other things, Lisa is the Deputy Chair of the Sentencing Advisory Council of Victoria and an independent advisor to the Victorian Youth Justice Reform Project. She has extensive experience in corrections, youth justice, child protection and family support. Next to Lisa is Brendan Money, who you've already heard about tonight, who retired from Corrections Victoria in 2019 as an Assistant Commissioner, having had a highly distinguished career of more than 30 years, including, as you will have gleaned from Tegan's speech, a period as General Manager of the Women's Prison in Melbourne, the Dame Phyllis Frost Centre. Next to Brendan is Judy Lazarus, who worked for Vacro for 2 months in 1983 and then didn't get around to leaving until 2003, by which time she had been CEO for a decade. Judy's effect was so profound that she received an Order of Australia and had a transitional prison named after her. Next to Judy is Glenn Broome, who is a peer worker at Ravenhall Correctional Centre. After growing up in state care and spending 5 years in prison, Glenn went back to school before embarking on a career in community work, including time as a family worker at Vacro. And on the end is Melanie Field-Pym, who is Vacro's Development Manager and has been with Vacro for almost 20 years. Mel has worked as a case manager and a program manager across family, homelessness and criminal justice programs, and now she leads our development work. So, over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Marius, and welcome everyone. It's just fantastic to have this diverse range of experience on our panel this evening, and several living legends. You can't hear me? Better? We all good? Thank you. And so good to have the living legends amongst us tonight. I think it'll make for a really rich discussion about reflections on Vacro's journey to date, but also some observations around where we may well head from here. With that in mind, I might start with you tonight, Judy, as a trailblazer in correctional services and as the patron of our organisation. It's really clear that after 150 years, Vacro's doing something desperately right. What is it that you think makes the difference for Vacro?
It's an incredibly difficult question, but it's about people. And really, I think the fact that we embrace people from every walk of life and walk with them along the way. And we haven't stopped doing that from the very beginning. And we do it incredibly well. So I think really it's all about people.
Thanks. Glenn, did you want to add to that?
What was the question?
What is it? What is it that Vacro does right? It's clearly doing something right.
They do a lot of things right. I'm just scanning the room at the moment and seeing a number of our senior people here. I want to thank you for being at that inaugural meeting back in 1871. You've actually exploded a awesome organisation that has almost beaten and lived longer than cockroaches. So that's pretty awesome. I think the thing with Vacro is that it's always been someone prepared to work with other agencies as well. So I see some people in the room. I see Jesuit Social Services, a morphed life of Peter Norden there. I don't think you're a father anymore, are you? No, just a Peter. I see Vaughan Griffith, not Vaughan Griffith at all, Vaughan Withers from AXO, the CEO of AXO. So the organisation, apart from doing some amazing work with people, it's also very interested in being collaborative with other organisations and picking up what they can't do and vice versa. And I think the other thing too, as smart as he's looking tonight, like the likes of Glenn Cooper comes here flashed up in the Louis Vuitton jacket and all the rest of it. He's a bare knuckle worker. He gets down in the gutter with the people, and I think that's something unique about Vacro is that it's never been afraid to get its hands dirty. Please put a time limit on me because I could talk for hours. But yeah, I think it's part of the Vacro culture. In its DNA is this need to be a part of and contribute, and the end goal is to help people have a meaningful life, for whatever that may be. Some might aspire to get a job and be an airline pilot or whatever it is, or Johnny might be just happy. Johnny gets a good flogging tonight, but Johnny might be just happy to go home and support his mum who's ageing, and he needs to man up and take some responsibility in the family home. So it's about what's meaningful to them, not a middle class standard of being a doctor, lawyer or such. It's okay to be a baker or a candlestick maker.
Thanks, Glenn. Fantastic. Mel, do you want to add? What's our special trick?
For me, I think it's probably the fact that we've stayed in our lane, that this is what we know, it's what we've always known and done, is the Victorian criminal justice system, and we're specialists in that, and we're good at it, which is exactly what Glenn said.
Just smile when you say that.
We're fabulous at it.
It's arrogant.
I don't hear you boasting very often, Mel. It's very unusual.
This is not my natural space
It's
up
not.
here.
It's not, no. That's great. And Brendan, as someone external to Vacro, you've probably got a perspective around, what its special contribution is to the Victorian landscape as a whole.
Lisa, can I just first quickly picking up where Glenn was speaking, when I was invited on the panel, I did ring one of my former colleagues, Sarah Miles, just seeking some counsel about coming here tonight. She said, "You'll be fine. Just give some reflections and observations of when you saw Vacro begin." So I figure I'm going in my 180th birthday. I think my answer to that, Lisa, is really easy. I mean, I worked in lots of different roles in corrections, lots of roles, lots of messy stuff. And, governments do some great work, corrections did some great work, but, there's lots of gaps, there's lots of spaces that can't be filled by policies and protocols. And I would like to, I'd really almost like to apologise to Vacro for some of the crap jobs that I threw at them over many, many years. And in all my roles across 34 years, there isn't one I didn't work with Vacro.
Yeah, great. Yep, fantastic. It's really interesting because back, 15 years or more ago, when we were just trying to shape up what the reintegration service model was going to look like in Victoria, and you were part of that, Judy, I remember running a public consultation, and we were talking about all the different service elements that could be involved. And we were talking about housing and employment, and someone from Vacro, after an hour or so in the room, stuck their hand up and said, "You can't actually quantify this. You do what the person needs on the day. It's a practical support, and any attempt to sort of put it into boxes is going to limit what we do." And that theme's really coming here tonight. It's about relationships. It's about meeting our clients where they are and delivering what has to happen at that point in time. I'm just wondering, given the long history that Vacro's had, whether you find it daunting working for them. What does it feel like to work for such a long-standing organisation? Yes, go for it.
What's it feel like? It was an amazing time, actually, and it was full of hope and full of opportunity. We had a great connection with corrections. You could pick up the phone and ring them and say, "Have you thought about?" I think it was an amazing time to be around. Things happened, and it was wonderful to see. There was change in the air. And although there were lots of changes, some things still today remain the same, unfortunately. But it was a great place to work, and it was a great honour. And I know to this day I miss the people that were around from every aspect of my work. There were some fantastic people, and I know I used to go home to my family and say, when I was in the prison today, I met this guy, and he was the loveliest person. And they'd look at me very strangely and say, oh, I don't think so. And it was around being able to separate what people had done and looking at the person. And I think that's one of the greatest lessons that I learned during my time at Vacro. Everybody is a person, and everybody deserves respect in some way or the other. What they do with that is completely up to them, but it's about having the opportunity. So I think it was an honour, it was a great time, and there were great people.
Thanks, Judy. And you've seen a lot of changes, Glenn, in your time. Do you want to reflect on some of the different iterations, the changes you've seen the organisation go through?
Oh, I don't think Vacro is alone in change. Every 20 minutes they're getting additional funding, getting funding pulled. It's quite a vicious little circle. But I suppose it's the key is to be resilient, to be able to work with the ebbs and flows. And because we work in a very political environment, I think we have to be adaptable to what's going on and what the community feels they need and all the rest of it. So we see a lot of toing and froing and ebbing and flowing and all the rest of it. I could have become a rapper then, that sort of rhymed, but I'm not. So I think it's really important that we learn to be flexible and be able to change and forge partnerships. And I think one of the biggest changes that we're going to see is on the back end of the Mental Health Royal Commission is the inclusion and involvement of lived experience. So that's going to be the next challenge for corrections, that if they believe in such a thing, that the value of lived experience, that means people with records going back into prisons. So that means taking a bit of risk. And the likes of me, that is an ex-armed robber that now works in a prison, I see it as a privilege to do that. I don't believe it's a right or I am entitled, but I do see that I'm a pioneer in forging a way for other people, because my love would be to see lived experience people working in every facet of the prison system. Early days yet, but someone will become a knock-on soon.
Rounding support for that one. And again, that it's a place that Vacro has really pioneered from the get-go. Vacro has understood that its participants are the experts in their own life, yeah? Right. And have spent a lot of time and energy committing to learning from the people that the organisation serves. And I think that's personally one of its great strengths.
And that's a platform for my November election. That's where I'm standing.
I'm wondering, thinking back over your journey with Vacro, what some of the highlights were. Inevitably, I'm guessing there are experiences that have stayed with you, that maybe have changed you and moved you in a particular way. Does anyone want to share, if I open it up, an experience that's had a huge impact on them in their time at Vacro?
I will say something. I think I was thinking back today over really what were some of the special moments. And I remember getting the phone call to say that there was going to be funding for post-release. And that was quite amazing, because for many, many years, when we talked to corrections about the need for post-release, they would say the moment someone walks out the door, it's no longer their responsibility. And so to get funding was amazing. I watched people walk out of Pentridge to be rearrested and put in the back of the divvy van immediately because their warrants hadn't been served while they were in prison. And it just seems so ridiculous to come out and have the police waiting for you. So to get post-release funding was incredibly exciting. And I will tell you, after I was told that, I walked over to the Windsor Hotel and I had high tea.
Have you got a highlight for us, Glenn?
I'm sort of stewing on it a little bit, whether to share it or not. I don't feel altogether comfortable, but Shaymar Al-Qaeda isn't in the audience, is she? No. Okay, I'll share it then. Shaymar Al-Qaeda used to work for corrections and is an amazing human being. And she's a practicing Muslim lady who wears the hijab and all the rest of it. Just a human, awesome human being. So you missed out on that, Shaymar. So what I wanted to share was that the work of Vacro has some interesting sort of aspects to it. And this might sound quite morbid as I share it, but please hang with me because it does have a happy ending. When I was a family worker at MAP, we used to sit in the visitors area in a little office, and we'd take various calls and console family members when they've had a visit and it hasn't gone the way they liked. We've had people come for visits and they've been knocked back, and they're quite crushed by the whole experience. So the family worker was designed to console them, and its main role was to connect the disconnected. So if you can imagine your first night in prison, you can't even remember your partner's mobile because it's just in your phone. So when you're arrested and you go to prison, all of a sudden you don't have any numbers, don't have any names. You know the address, but no one's physically going to go there. Which is a big change from Vacro of the 70s and 80s when they reached out to people and physically contacted them and stuff like that, went to their homes and got the details and returned belongings and things like that. It's a big change to what it is today. I got a phone call at about, visits were from about 10 o'clock I think, and about 9:30 I got a phone call from this lady that said, my son, he doesn't sound right on the phone. I'm going to come in and see him. I said, yeah, sure. Pop in and see me and we'll sort it out. As she came through the puffer machine, a code black was called. Code black, beep, 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 which locks down the entire prison. So that means she wasn't going to have a visit, and nor was anyone else. I said, look, do you want to go home or do you want to sit down? And she said, I'm going to wait to see my son. I said, okay, because she'd come all the way from Caroline Springs, fair hike. Little Romanian lady, stood about 3 foot tall, made me look like a giant. So I went up to the desk and said, what do you think's going to go on with the code black? And she said, the officer said, that woman's son has just taken his life. And I thought, oh, great. So anyway, I went back and it wasn't my place to say that her son had passed away. So I'm just sitting there, sitting with her. And I said, you sure you don't want to go home? It looks like the code black's going to go for hours. And she said, no, I want to see my son. I said, okay, so I'll sit with you, I said. And it was, idiot me, it was Ramadan. So I'm offering her coffee, water, tea, a biscuit. That's the sort of things blokes do when they're trying to, support someone. We're very much doers. And so anyway, we got into conversation and I said, so do you live alone? Or she said, yes. I said, okay. I said, you got other children? She said, yeah, one daughter. Said, and this is your only son? She said, now. I said, oh, okay. I said, what do you mean by now? She said, oh, my son is dead. He died in a car accident. I said, oh, that's no good. She said that was about 8 or 10 years ago. I said, what about your husband? He was in the car too and they both passed away. So every time I had to open my mouth with this woman, she shared about what she'd got left in the world. So she had one daughter. And in her mind, she still had a son, but I knew that that wasn't the case. So from about 10 o'clock in the morning right till about 4:30 in the afternoon, I sat with this woman. And it's not something I do comfortably. Like, I'm pretty, get up and around kind of guy. The thought of me sitting still for more than 20 minutes, I mean, if my wife heard about this story, she'd have kittens. But so it was really difficult for me, but it was about her, not me. And sitting there the whole time knowing that her son had passed away, she had to be informed by the police, not by anybody else. So they came in and did a preliminary examination and all the rest of it. Then at about 4:30, they came out and told her. In the meantime, someone cleverer than me got hold of Shaymar al-Qaidi to come and stay with this woman for a bit. I am so grateful that that happened, because this is a woman that had I don't know, Brendan, what sort of role did she have at the department? Pretty high up, wasn't it? Yeah. So this woman sort of lived in, I call the Ivory Tower of Collins Street, or wherever you're based. And she came down the stairs, walked the street to Map Prison, came in through the door and sat with us. And, part of me wanted to do this, but that wasn't the case. What I'm trying to explain is that this woman in a very high power brought herself down to the level of sitting with this mother. Probably unheard of, or if it hasn't been told enough. So the police came in and informed this woman, and Peter Norton's familiar with a lot of these sort of situations in his previous work. And this woman just howled, and she scared the shit out of me, because she yelled, like the wailing stuff. And I'm not sort of a godly man, but I was praying at the time that this was a good spirit that was going on with this woman. But eventually she settled down, so it was about organising how was she going to get home. She came in on a tram and a train. We organised the people to come. The two people that I organised to come were crying and wailing as much as her. So I thought, oh shit, don't tell me I've got to get a cab or something. If I keep calling out people, I have 20 people around me all wailing and no one in the right mind to take her home. So we ended up sorting a cab and that. But I think one of the resounding things that came back was Vacro's stickability. That, it was so important. Now that woman, what are we talking, 2015, 14? I still have contact with that mum to this day. It's just occasional, she'll ring and share about how she's going and how much she misses her boy. And I think, there needs to be a place for that longevity of relationship, because we connect with people and then we say, oh, hang about, under the terms of our contract, we can only work with you for 6 months. So whether I'm in the right place or the wrong place, I don't take notes or minutes or any of that sort of crap. I just have a conversation with her from one human being to another. And I think she loves that.
Fabulous. Thank you. There's just so much in that, Glenn. My overwhelming reaction to it is, again, Vacro's humanity, that ability to do what's required in the moment and to meet the person where they are with what they need, and also a really telling example of how organisations collaborate at the time. Everyone pulls in, mucks in, does what needs to be done when someone is hurting and in pain. So I think that's a really terrific demonstration of what we're about. Brendan, did you want to, do you have any reflections on, I guess you, more than just about anyone in the justice system, have had contact with thousands and thousands of people who've moved through and have touched their lives. Do you have any reflections on how Vacro's impacted them in turn?
Oh, look, I have a million, but this story is really quite tragic, actually, but I'll keep it really brief. It's 20 years old. I was the acting director of prisons at the time, and there was an incident at St Vincent's Hospital, a prisoner on an escort. He attempted to escape. The prisoner officer drew his firearm and fired, and the prisoner was killed. It was a terrible, terrible incident from both the perspective of the prisoner and the family, and indeed the prison officers. It set the system into a little bit of chaos. There was industrial action, prisoner unrest. There were lots of problems to solve for me and other corrections people. There was ministers and governments and bureaucrats all deeply affected. It was a big community. It happened in a public place. It was pretty awful. And so, with the help of other people, we set about trying to kind of deal with it, deal with all the issues. But there was one issue that I just didn't know how to deal with, and that was the prisoner's family. And I'm kind of thinking, well, I'm the director of prisons, I'm sitting in this big suit, in this position of power. This is something that we as a corrections organisation and a kind of an agency of government need to do something. This is a terrible incident, and that is what led me to well, how the hell am I going to solve this? So, and I knew I couldn't solve it myself, so I rang Vacro, Judy, and probably the response from Vacro is what they didn't say to me. First of all, they didn't say push 1 for customer service, push 2 for operations, push 3 for, push 4 if you want to speak to someone in Vancouver. Nor did they ask me to fill out a form or write a submission or I'll get back to you in 21 days. Judy knew I was very, very toey about this. She said, "Shut up, Brendan. Give me..." Yeah, she did. She didn't call me Mr. Money. She said, "Give me the name of the family and give me the number and leave it to me." And then the phone went bang, and from there I knew what was going on. Yeah. I could deal with the rest of the stuff, but I knew Vacro was doing its stuff.
Yep.
Weaving its magic. Pair of hands. Safe pair of hands. Yeah. I could walk away from that and I felt like I got the strength back on my legs again, because I knew that was in the hands of people who cared, people who were experts, people who would just get it done. It's a story that is tragic, but it is one that I think just tells a story about what Vacro does.
Absolutely, and it is. I mean, the stories that are coming forward really reflect that many of the people we work with have tragic lives. That is the reality, and it's how the organisation supports that and deals and sits with people's grief that I think's been really. And everyone playing to their special skills. You do your bit in the system, that's right, and Vacro does its, which is important.
Lisa, can I just add to that? I remember it very, very clearly, Brendan, and no, and I remember organising the funeral for that person, but it was just one of many instances where Vacro worked with corrections, and we worked very quietly. I think that was something that is very special about Vacro. We don't yell from the treetops, but there is a way that we can support, that we can do what's needed to be done very quietly, but still advocate strongly. I think that's one of the very special aspects about Vacro, responding to what corrections needed at the time and acknowledging that this is our space and we do it very, very well. And I think I remember that very amazing family saying to me, "Thank you for organising the funeral, but we really want his coffin on the back of a Harley to go all the way along." Didn't happen, I might but just the requests we get and how we work with it. But that relationship with corrections was quite astounding over the years, and many a phone call, "Can Vacro do this?" I think we buried quite a number of prisoners over the years very quietly, and there is a prisoner who had been in since the age of 15, been there for a long, long time, had died. We buried him, and then Archie Butley, we buried Archie in with Kenny. And when we had the final service, I remember putting 2 long neck bottles of beer in brown paper bags on the coffin so they wouldn't fight when they got together.
I love it. So the full life journey that Vacro covers with its clients. Mel, you've been a bit quiet down the end there. I'm wondering if you could reflect for us on your early days at Vacro, maybe even your first day, because you started at Vacro as a student, I understand.
I did.
What was that like, and what was the transition for you?
I started as a student under duty, and I was placed to work in MAP, in a men's maximum security prison, and I was a very, very diligent student, and I had prepped myself for what I believed I was going to be facing, so I was ready for aggression, manipulation, low intellect. Like, I thought I knew it all, and I was ready, and I walked in and I was just blown away. There is such a broad range of human beings who end up in prison for all manner of reasons, and there are so many incredibly smart people who you could just really quickly see just hadn't survived our not great education system safely and successfully, unfortunately. So this was a shock to me as a student. I was not prepared, and I had my prejudices. Not that I thought I had prejudices, but they were knocked out of me incredibly quickly, and that was an incredibly amazing experience, and a very funny one to look back on when I was put to work in MAP, and I wrote my own group program that I delivered in a men's maximum prison, and I think that would never happen for a student these days.
No. Things are a bit different. But I think the point you make is a really important one. So many people that you talk with will say, I have all these preconceptions about what people in the justice system are like, what it's like to walk into a prison. And again, you need to actually have that connection with people to realise that we are all the same, that people are people. And I think that's the sort of starting point that Vacro begins with and goes on with in its work. I wonder if we could start looking to the future a little bit and talk a bit about what you'd like to see for Vacro next. Perhaps you, Judy, are there particular directions that you think are important?
There are many directions I think we could take and do it all well, but one of the things that has always stayed with me, and even as I play in my garden, I have moments of thinking about the transition prison for males. We still have none for females, and I think Vacro would be really well placed to run such a transition prison. With all the skills that we have, with what we know, we do it incredibly well. And I think there's space for that into the future, to look at what we might be able to do in a different space. And we know that transition prisons reduce recidivism incredibly. We also get told constantly that they're very expensive to run, but it's also very expensive to build new prisons. And we're talking about people's lives. And one of the things that I remember always is listening to the guys that come back to the prison after they've been released to speak about their journey and how utterly incredible their story is, how they've worked hard, how they've succeeded outside, what their aspirations are for the future. And I think we're a bit the same. We've got a story to tell, and we'll keep telling it, we'll keep doing it well, and I think there's space to us to do a lot more than we currently do. All we need is a bit of money, a bit of funding, which is always the problem. But there is that space where I think we can branch out and do something a little bit different, and we would do it well.
Thanks, Judy. Mal, you're our Director of Development. You will have a keen eye on the future. What are some of the directions you think we'll start to pursue?
Well, one would definitely be around what we now call people with lived experience, which, as has been mentioned, has always been at Vacro, certainly all my time. We've always had people employed as students, as volunteers, they've been consulted. We just haven't necessarily done it terribly well or with the right level of forethought and care, but I think it's a real together learning process now, and that, you know, it's stemming from those 80s approach where it's very grassroots and open, and we were all sitting at the lunch table together, and then we went through the professionalisation when we really hit the 2000s across all sectors with OH&S and quality and risk, and it actually meant that we put up physical barriers in our office between our clients and us. And I think we're now moving towards kind of pulling the best of those approaches together, that we can be far more inclusive and integrated and valuing the voice of lived experience in a really meaningful way, but doing it with the right processes and to ensure that it is a truly two-way process. You know, they're getting something out of it, we're getting something out of it, community's getting something out of it. So I think that's definitely one way that we will be travelling, and the other is I'm probably going to say I'd like to see it change from Vacro being the quiet voice, Judy, and sorry, Minister and Commissioner, and that we'd probably like to be a bit louder and have a bit more influence over what things look like.
Fabulous, thank you. I think there'll be a lot of support in the room for that one tonight. I think it's interesting, Judy, you know, you were reflecting on that moment when the policy setting shifted and government said, yes, we have a legitimate space and role in the provision of reintegration services. I look to the future and I think that next shift will be when government makes the same call around supporting families of people involved in the justice system. And I think there'll be another high tea at the Windsor or wherever you were, because that is the next the thing that has to occur. I'm going to start to draw us in. Before I do so, are there any other reflections that people came tonight saying, I really want to get this across to the participants at the 150th about Vacro?
I've got one.
Yeah, go
it's
for
really
it.
quick. And I think to be able to keep an organisation like Vacro on its feet for 150 years takes something quite extraordinary. So I'm not quite sure, you know, I'm sure it's leadership, culture, and getting amazing people to work for you. I think that's just an extraordinary thing to do, and I would really just like to say congratulations, because I just think you're amazing.
Fabulous. Okay. My last question, you've got to describe for me Vacro's contribution in the past 150 years. One sentence. Come on, Mel.
So I'm going to shove a lot in one sentence.
A big sentence.
Oh gosh, okay, I think number one, it's that the staff and the organisation have been really fearless in their work in a space that's really hard to work in. But in doing that, they've also been very humanising in what's a very dehumanising space to work in as well. And so always, as has constantly come up in this panel, the person is front and centre, the story, the history, the background before they got to this space, and talking to that person and asking them what's your what else, and then seeking the opportunities to help them find that what else.
Thanks, Mel. That was a long sentence. but a very worthwhile one, thank you. Glenn, I'm sure Glenn will give you a run for your money.
I'll just try to sink what she said into a few words. Actually, I'm going to hijack it for a few moments. If you vote for me in November and I get the opportunity to be the minister for a day, one of the serious things that we need to look at is spending just about as much money in the community as we do in prisons.
Yes.
We do time, we do our jail, and unfortunately what happens, all the good work that we do inside the prison falls over on the outside because there's a lot of reporting going on. We've got a guy on parole who has to do about 10 appointments a week, P tests, this test, that test, report to this person, report to that person, meet with my reintegration worker, meet with my reconnect worker, make some time for my children, and try and hold a job. So it's very unrealistic. We've got a number of people coming out of prisons into the community that are jobless. Okay, so why not look at cottage industries? Why not look at social enterprises that engages these guys in employment? Because when I talked to them, they said, oh, I just want a job, want a car, want to get a girlfriend, be able to buy her flowers, maybe have some kids. Pretty unrealistic stuff, isn't it? Eh? I mean, it's sort of pretty much what everyone wants in this room. So just taking it to a personal level, I want to personalise this. She's not here under any sort of official capacity, but I want to acknowledge Fiona Patten, MP for the Reason Party, the leader of the Reason Party who's with us tonight. Last year, and some of her friends and other pollies and all that, I don't understand the political stuff, they put forward a bill called the Spent Sentences Act of 2021. I thought that'd be pretty handy for me because it's got a clause in there that says that if you served over 30 months, it will remain on your record forever. And I've lived of 40 years of forever. So I committed a crime, an armed robbery in 1982, and it's still on my record today. Sorry, I lie. It's still on my record as of yesterday. So I took mine, I thought there's a little clause in there that Fiona put in there, a little arrangement between me and her, that anybody with 30 months could take it back to the Magistrates Court and have it spent under the Serious Offenders Act. So anyway, I thought I'll do that. So I put out a post on LinkedIn, pretty heavy on LinkedIn, looking for a pro bono lawyer. And Ben Watson put his hand up, amazing man. He said, I'll take it on. This will be a bit of an experiment. I said, well, I'll join you. So we went through the process. And yesterday I got a phone call saying, Glenn, your sentence is spent. Woo! What does that mean?
Thanks, Glenn.
What does that mean? That means that I can apply for a job with Vacro, AXO, Jesuits, whoever, because you're NGOs, and I'll put in my police check with confidence and say, nothing will come back. There's nothing to disclose, and nothing will come back. However, if I apply for a job in your department, it will come up. But that's okay, because there's an element of national security that we have to. Can't just have anyone like me as a politician or police commissioner,
okay.
Can you?
Thanks, Glenn, you asked me to say, now's your time.
So now's my time. I just want to say that I have to speak for all NGOs, but in particular Vacro, is that there's nothing about me without me. And that's the principle that we work on. When we're working with our clients, nothing about them without them. And if you involve them in the journey, then the outcomes will be good.
Thank you so much. No, well worth it. Do you want to contribute a sentence, Judy, or are you done for the night? How about you, Brendan?
Every criminal justice system needs a Vacro.
Yeah,
Yep.
Love it, love it.
Just gives people a bit of hope.
Love it. And the passion and the humanity and the kindness and care that Vacro brings to the fore, I think, has been amply demonstrated tonight. It's hard to capture that. And I agree with you, Mel. I think Vacro is not an organisation that likes to talk about itself. It has a history of quiet accomplishment, of doing, not talking, of getting on with the job. But I think tonight, the commentary that has come from everyone on this panel has been quite extraordinary and has actually showcased the kindness and humanity for which Vacro is renowned. So thank you very much for that contribution. Please join me. One of the recurrent themes that's come up tonight has been that importance of lived experience. And for that reason, it's really important that we end tonight with a couple of video vignettes that contain the voices of our clients. The first video vignette that you'll see involves the voices of two children who were supported by Romy Same, Vacro's family counsellor, while their parent was in jail. And the second video shows an interview with the children's grandmother. You know, grandmothers are gold, who supported the children while their parent was in jail. So please enjoy these last two couple of vignettes.
Back then, our mother just got put into prison, and it wasn't really a nice scenario. You feel a little lonely.
It was nice having Vacro there. I found it more as someone to talk to, because I didn't really want to talk to my family about how I felt with my mum not being in the picture and going away. So I felt like seeing you every week or twice a week, or sort of like an escape to tell you like how I felt, because I knew that you understood.
It made sure that you had help from others. You also got to know that others also needed help in the same situation as you. It was the drawings. It was like self-realization of what your problems were.
I probably wasn't realizing I was expressing how I felt, because like I was playing with toys and like a notebook. But like I think that if my brother and I didn't have like seeing you growing up, that we probably would have had a lot of baggage going into our young adolescence.
Going back to the sessions with you, it also shows what the problems I had, how they still actually come today. And that's really nice to look at, to still see that your problems weren't unjustified, that they're actually, there's reasons behind it.
I think probably seeing you made us feel like our emotions were sort of like understood. That you like understood where we were coming from. You knew how we felt. Like it didn't feel like we were being judged.
I reckon there would have been a nice big hole in the heart, like just loneliness. That is what truly will mess up a child. It's the feeling of that you have no one else. That you gave us that. This gave us the ability to feel like, hey, you can have help. I can piece together your little heart just to make it a one big thing again.
I think having Vacro helped me to like lay out my emotions, express how I felt growing up. Looking back, if I didn't have that support that I did from Vacro and being able to see you every week and doing like the worry books and saying how I felt, I think I would have just felt like I was like walking on like glass. But it was like nice knowing that you have someone to talk to, and especially knowing that they weren't from the school or like a family member, because then you know that your privacy's there.
That there is others that do care for them, even if someone who truly does left them or can't be with them, that there are others that can give them that.
I think that kids in our situation should know that their parents don't define them. I think that's a big thing, like a very big thing. You should know that your parents don't define you and you do create your own path, and it doesn't matter. I've had little pauses in my life journey because I was set back a bit with my parents going away, but you should know that doesn't define you. If anything, this has made me stronger. So if I know if anything comes in the way and like rocks are thrown at me, that I can get through it if I went through that traumatic childhood that my brother and I went through.
It was happening, my daughter ended up in the prison and she had two young children. The granddaughter was 6 years old and the grandson was 5 years old. And I was fighting for custody of them, and then through the prison I met Vacro, your organization, and it was a lifesaver. I knew that somebody is there to talk to me and to show me the right way where to go and what support to get, and support for my grandchildren. Romy was coming weekly to speak with them and to help him to deal with it and to have a video conference with the mother. And because they were missing her, it was very hard time. It was lots of crying, but with the support of the organization and people, we managed it, and I am very grateful. They're very grateful for everything what we had. The most precious memories were, I bring them to Romy, they were sad, and when I come to pick them up, they were happy. So I knew that helped a lot with the drawing, with the games, with the talking. And that was the most precious memories, to see the happy children, happy grandchildren. They had an impact because they knew they are not the only one. They felt more confident, and they felt that they are not isolated, and gave them some kind of courage, gave them the courage to go through all that. And especially because many times we couldn't go and see the mother, so when they saw the mother through the video, they felt happy because they knew that she's there. So it had a very positive impact on the grandchildren and myself. All the support what we had, I couldn't do without it. So I believe if another family just receive what we receive, they should be very grateful, because it's all coming at the right time. You know, in your life, you meet the people when you need them, and that's really precious. I just want to say the thank you for everything to everybody.
All right. Before we get to the socialising, I want to say a few words about Vacro's past and future. But before I do that, I want to acknowledge a few people who made this event happen. Our communications advisor, Angela Smith, discovered our historic connection to this venue, produced the videos, and put in hours of work on all sorts of other issues, only for us to have to reschedule to a time when she was away on holidays. The other person who's played an enormous role is Gillian Tempany, who, since starting with us a few months ago, has arranged everything tonight down to the last detail. And thanks to all of the Vacro staff who are doing a whole range of roles tonight, from ushering to selling books and other roles. After the event, you can see we'll be having some light refreshments at the back of the hall. And during that time, Michael will accompany us with some music he was playing beforehand. Michael's a singer-songwriter who's been playing for over 60 years, and tonight he's performing a mix of covers and original songs about his own experience of incarceration. He performs around town, and you can find him on Instagram, if you can remember this, BEW 2021 Music. We have the room for about another hour, although that will then conclude the official evening. There will be the Crafty Squire around the corner has made a room available for those who might like to continue the conversation with friends. Now, before we finish, some final words about Vacro's past and future. Naturally, the recollections of those on stage tonight only go back so far. So to go all the way back, you need a professional, and for that reason, we turn to a historian. 2021 was incredibly busy for Vacro, so it was only earlier this year that we started to prepare for the 150th, which was to include a series of historical stories for our website. But when we were put in touch with the historian Faye Woodhouse, she convinced us to set her a much more ambitious challenge. Write a history of Vacro in time for this event, originally scheduled for July, giving her just 6 weeks. Anyone who's met Faye would not be surprised that she succeeded in putting together... Should have got those up earlier. This history of Vacro. It's a compelling history which will be on sale afterwards. And I'd like to acknowledge Faye for her incredible work over such a short period of time, and the sheer enthusiasm that she brought to the task. Faye, are you nearby? Where are you? Can you stand up for us, Faye? Faye's book contains stories of many remarkable Vacro people, like the 3 generations of the Ince family, the legendary Dame Phyllis Frost, after whom Melbourne's women's prison is named, and Alfred Clark, who served as secretary from 1902 to 1950. Alfred first convinced authorities to allow a welfare organisation, Vacro, inside Pentridge Prison, and we see that legacy in the through care provided by many community organisations on both sides of the prison gate today. Alfred was an astute and compassionate welfare worker for almost half a century, and I'm delighted that his surviving grandchild, Bruce Pilkington, and a number of his descendants are here tonight. One thing that comes through clearly in the history is that Vacro has changed enormously and innovated continually, but in many ways is still the same organisation. We're still specialists in criminal justice reintegration, as we were in 1872. We've always been a reliable presence in participants' lives, and we will work for as long as we are needed. It's embarrassing, that was me. Today we work predominantly in three areas: family, employment, and of course general reintegration. In each of these areas we can draw a line back to the earliest days of Vacro and through to the current day and into the future, and I want to talk briefly about each. Although Vacro's initial focus was on those leaving prison, it expanded its focus to women and families of prisoners when Alfred Clark commenced in 1902. There was a steady increase in assistance for families, which fully crystallised in the 1970s with the employment of the first family welfare officer and the formation of that amazing group of women mentioned in Eve Cantor's video. In the following decades, Vacro ran family programs across every part of the criminal justice system. And family work remains vital to us today. We have three programs: family visits, family counselling, and Aboriginal family visits, which provides financial support to people travelling to visit incarcerated loved ones. Earlier, Scott mentioned our groundbreaking family visits program, which was a world first when we started it 10 years ago as a philanthropically funded pilot connecting mums in prison to their kids in the community via video with support from a family worker. An evaluation of the pilot showed that when kids are on call from the comfort of their home, instead of being in an inhospitable prison, they show off their artwork, they do homework, they sing, and they even misbehave, requiring some discipline and guidance from mum and cooperation between mum and the child's carer. Even now, video visit programs here and overseas are seen as a second best option to connect people in prison to loved ones who are far away. But our evaluation highlighted the unique value of this program. It brings whole relationships to life, the fun stuff and the serious stuff. It maintains and even strengthens the family bonds, laying the foundations for healthy, lifelong relationships. And that's why people need both supported video visits and in-person visits. And that's why, as Scott mentioned, we were delighted when Corrections Victoria agreed to fund an expanded family visits program focusing on all family relationships. After 150 years, it's a demonstration of how we're still analysing, evolving and innovating, and how our unique perspective is more important than ever. Another example of this perspective is how we see family. We have a very broad and inclusive definition of family. And also, we don't just see it as something that's relevant to the women's prisons. The system often doesn't see men as dads, yet the men do. And the kids are often their reason for wanting to create a new life. It's a point we're continually making, and it was borne out last year. We used philanthropic funds to expand the life-changing family counselling program that the kids and their grandmother spoke about so passionately in that video. To the men's prison at Beechworth, and we then had to institute a waiting list for the service almost immediately. And things are changing. As Scott mentioned, the family visits program will now expand to all men's prisons, almost all men's prisons, over the next 12 months. It's a huge step forward, and I want to especially thank the Commissioner Larissa Strong, who's here with us tonight, and the Minister for their support of this program. Just one more thing on families. About a year ago, when doing some planning for our family programs, we decided to use our extensive experience, knowledge and research to sketch out a comprehensive vision of how families of people caught in the criminal justice system should be supported from a loved one's point of arrest through the court and prison process and back to community. We recently published the vision in collaboration with the Centre for Excellence in Child and Family Welfare, and the recent parliamentary inquiry into children affected by parental incarceration published the summary of the vision in its report and adopted many of our recommendations. And over the coming years, we plan to work with government and the sector to make this vision a reality. Our second area of focus is employment. From the start, the Prisoners' Aid Society identified that employment would help prison leavers to develop independence and self-respect, but that there was a very real prejudice against employing prisoners. Fast forward today and very little has changed. Over the past decade, we've run two small but very successful social enterprises that help people caught in the system to develop their employability skills, Second Chance Coffee and Second Chance Cycles. And in 2019, we began strategising about how to best help people into employment on a large scale. We poured over evidence from around the world and our own knowledge, and over an 18-month period, we designed Second Chance Jobs, which has 3 elements. First, a formal in-prison employment preparation program. Second, connecting participants as they leave prison with employers willing to take a chance on them. And third, pairing each participant with a post-release case manager who helps the participant to solve the problems that make it hard to get to the job each day and supports the employer who can pick up the phone whenever they need. The program's now up and running at Loddon and Middleton prisons thanks to the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation, Portland House Foundation and Corrections Victoria. Our first candidates are working in the community, and we have a list of almost 40 employers wanting to work with us. We have a long way to go to reach the scale that we hope to for this program, but we are excited about a pending expansion to support 50 to 100 people into jobs on the North East Link project, which will also include a Second Chance cafe and mobile food truck to cater to the thousands of employees and visitors to the site, while assisting hundreds of people completing community corrections orders to develop employability skills and then move into employment. Our third focus is general reintegration, and of course it is unambiguously what Vacro has done since day one and will always do, helping people with a difficult transition out of prison and towards a new and better life. Our 2 biggest programs, Relink and Reconnect, fall under this banner. Relink's a pre-release group program where participants learn about succeeding in different aspects of life and then develop their own personal transition plan. Post-release, many Relink participants are eligible for the Reconnect case management service. The case manager often picks the participant up at the prison gate and over the following months helps them to put their personal transition plan into effect. We've recently been re-tendering for these programs, and I'm delighted to announce that today we signed long-term contracts with Corrections Victoria for both programs. We will continue to run Relink at all the relevant men's prisons and Reconnect in Barwon, South West and Grampians, and we'll also expand our Reconnect work into the Loddon Melly region, including Bendigo and Mildura. For many years we've worked closely with our fellow Reconnect providers, AXO and Jesuit Social Services, and it's great to see so many names from both organisations on the guest list for tonight. Over the past 2 years, we overhauled many aspects of how Vacro worked as we prepared for the tenders. And one thing I want to highlight is the new theory of change that we created. And without going into the weeds, it's based on 3 pillars. The capabilities approach, which is well known in our sector. Desistance theory, which is the most comprehensive articulation of how people desist from crime and create new beginnings. And that through care that I mentioned earlier, which emphasises that people need support from community organisations that starts in prison and follows them into the community. The way we've combined this evidence and practice into a clear articulation of how we work is, to our knowledge, a world first, and it gives our staff the strongest and most evidence-based framework for doing what comes naturally to Vacro: analysing, questioning, revising and innovating, because we will never stop asking, is this the best way? The approach was recognised recently when the Victorian Government selected our ARC program as Victoria's 5th social impact bond. The government specifically referenced our theory of change as a standout feature of the bid. And I should say that the announcement is only the first step. We're currently in a very intensive months-long joint development phase with the government with the intention of signing a contract soon and commencing delivery next year. Assuming that the contract is signed, the program will provide intensive pre-release preparation and 2 years of post-release case management support to approximately 440 people. But the game changer is housing. More than half of people leave prison into homelessness. It's a crisis of immense proportions. Under this program, a group of community housing providers across the state will provide up to 2 years of transitional housing for each participant while we work with them to build their new life and transition into long-term accommodation. The project has the potential to define a new benchmark for reintegration. And because it will have a strong focus on measuring the outcomes, it will enable the entire sector to identify what works and what needs to change at a level of detail that we have not previously been able to do. Now, I want to finish by mentioning one more important aspect of our organisation, and that is Vacro as a voice for change. In her history, Faye recounts an inquiry into the allegations of brutality and ill treatment at Pentridge following an incident in our centenary year of 1972. After the inquiry, Vacro said in its newsletter, "We did not appear before the inquiry to make a submission. It's sad, but we did not, and we must take full blame for not doing so and failing the community and the government that supports us. An opportunity like this must never be missed in the future." I hope Vacro's leaders back then would have approved of our determination to bring that sentiment to life. As a criminal justice provider, I believe we have an obligation to speak out and to help those who have been in the system to speak out, because we see so much. We understand what works and what doesn't, and we know what needs to change. Over the last 3 years, we've made substantial submissions to multiple parliamentary inquiries, to a colonial inquest, and to a coronial inquest, and to consultations by commissions, auditors and government departments. We've increased our policy collaboration with peak bodies and fellow civil society organisations. And most importantly, we've recently developed a lived experience framework to bring more people who've had contact with the criminal justice system into Vacro in a way that ensures they are better for the experience. Where they want to, we want to enable this group to speak for themselves. As we look forward, our next step will be to release our strategic plan in November, and there's no shortage of things to focus on. All of you would know there is much to be done to create a more just society where everyone lives with dignity and respect. I'd like to think that there will come a time when we have reached that lofty height where an organisation like ours is no longer required. But until that time, we will be here, walking alongside people as they strive to create new beginnings and stronger communities, and always asking, can we do this better? So thank you to all of you for coming along tonight, and I hope you'll stay for a bite to eat and a conversation. Thank you.